Teresa, so you're not hearing the music playing, eh? Sorry, I just want to check.
No, I'm not.
Now I'm not getting the option. There it is. It's the music is playing on my side. Not sure why you're not hearing it.
That's okay. I hope everyone else hears it as well. It's totally fine.
Teresa, sorry, will you just hang on? I just want to check a video then. Um, can you hear it? Any sound?
No, no, but no. No. But maybe it's just me.
Goodness, I wonder why. Shucks. I wonder why it does not want to play the sound in the videos. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm just having some technical difficulties, so I have a few videos that I wanted to play, which might now be playing without sound, but we just have to push through these technical issues. So let me start. I hope everyone is doing well. Sorry, I'm just still admitting some people joining late. Um, there we go. So just hang on with me. Teresa, who's also assisting with this presentation, will be assisting with admitting everyone coming in now. But yeah, I think we can maybe start. So welcome to everyone. This is one of the first web chats that we will be doing as Laja. We are doing this to get a bit of engagement with members. So yeah, we're looking forward to holding a few more. I'll go over to the presentation now. Okay, so just a bit of background. I'm Anja Esterhuizen. I'm the mine closure team lead for DP Wells. Sorry, I don't know why this thing, there we go. And we're just going to chat a bit about closure today. I usually do this presentation quite interactively, but due to the amount of people joining, we decided to not do it interactive today. So you're welcome to send through any questions or anything. Sorry, I just want to do one last check if anyone is joining. Okay. So you are more than welcome to send through your questions to either Teresa or to myself, and then I will get to them promptly. Okay, so basically today what we're going to discuss is just what is closure, some of the laws and best practice guidelines guiding closure in South Africa, the road towards closure, alternative thinking with regards to inland use planning, and then the takeaway message. So again, apologies, I have a few videos in. I will try and chat through the videos, but we might we might get through it a bit earlier due to having no sound. Okay, so just in terms of closure, I want everyone to think about the definition in their heads. What do you think about when you hear closure? So, like I said, I usually do this a bit interactively, but basically, when I chat to people, a lot of people in social divisions think about retrenchments. A lot of mine managers has mentioned liabilities. That's what comes to mind when they hear mine closure. And then a lot of people have said rehabilitation. So let's see if I can change everyone's mind to one word. Okay, so basically, mine closure has several definitions, but it is basically the process of ending mining operations and moving towards a planned post-closure land use or users. It takes into account your physical aspects, such as your infrastructure, which includes your plants, workshops, etc., as well as your mining components, such as your dumps, open pits, etc. Also, your biophysical aspects, such as groundwater, surface water, biodiversity, climate, etc., as well as your socioeconomic aspects, such as employees, communities, government, etc. And it has financial implications linked to it. So it's basically like I said, a process where you plan from cradle to grave. You need to take into consideration your disturbances before mining has commenced already. And it is an integrated approach. So you need to include it in your mine business plan, your short-term planning, your medium-term planning, as well as your life of mine planning. And the reason for the boomerang is it's a process where you might go back a few steps. You might need to return to an aspect. It's ever changing. That's why you need to update it continuously. And as you move towards closure, you will become more accurate. Okay, then some of the laws and best practice guidelines guiding closure in South Africa. We have our constitution. So it basically states that everyone has the right to an environment that's not harmful to their health or well-being, and to have the environment protected for the benefit of present and future generations through reasonable legislative and other measures that prevent pollution and ecological degradation, promote conservation, and secure ecologically sustainable development and use of natural resources while promoting justifiable economic and social development. We also have our National Environmental Management Act. I've heard lawyers coined the term the umbrella legislation under which all the environmental legislation will fall. So it was set in place in accordance with Section 24 of the Constitution, and it states that certain environmental principles under NEMA have to be adhered to inform decision-making for issues affecting the environment. It states that potential impact on the environment and socio-economic conditions or activities that require authorization or permission by law and which may significantly affect the environment must be considered, investigated, and assessed prior to the implementation and reported to the organ of state charged by law authorizing, permitting, or otherwise allowing the implementation of an activity. We also have our National Environmental Management Biodiversity Act, which regulates the management and conservation of biodiversity of South Africa within the framework provided under NEMA. It also regulates the protection of species and ecosystems that require national protection. It also takes into account the management of alien invasive species. We also have our National Water Act. It provides for the sustainable and equitable use and protection of water resources. Founded on the principle that the national government has overall responsibility for and authority over water resource management, including equitable allocation and beneficial use of water in the public interest, and that a person can only be entitled to use water if the use is permissible under the Water Act. Then we have our Air Quality Act. So the Department of Environmental Affairs, the provincial environmental departments, and local authorities are separately and jointly responsible for the implementation and enforcement of various aspects of the Air Quality Act. A fundamental aspect of the air quality regulation, as reflected in the Air Quality Act, is the establishment of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. These standards provide the goals for air quality management plans and also provide the benchmark by which the effectiveness of these management plans are measured. Then in terms of mine closure, it is regulated by the Minerals and Petroleum Resources Development Act, the MPRDA, as well as the National Environmental Management Act, NEMA. And it is to ensure that rehabilitation of land and beneficial post-closure uses of infrastructure for alternative livelihood development. So in terms of the MPRDA, regulations 53 and 54 promulgated in terms of the MPRDA deal with financial provisioning for mine closure. The holder of a right, as described in the relevant sections of the MPRDA and its regulations, must provide the DMRE with sufficient financial provision. Hence, there is the guideline document for the evaluation of quantum of closure-related financial provision provided by the mine. So currently we have two methods of financial provisioning, this being the first one. And then also in terms of applying for your closure certificate, that also still falls under the MPRDA. So an application for a closure certificate by the holder of prospecting right, mining right, retention permit, or mining permit in terms of Section 43(4) of the Act must be completed in form of Form P. The application referred to in Sub-Regulation 1 must also be accompanied by the following documentation. So this is everything that you need to submit in terms of applying for a closure certificate. It is your closure plan, an environmental risk report, a final performance assessment report or site audit, and then a completed application form in terms of the transfer of liabilities, which is your Form O, which you also need to submit. Then the second method for financial provisioning in South Africa falls under NEMA. So Regulation 6 of the Financial Provision Regulations require a holder of a mining right to determine the quantum of financial provision through detailed itemization of all activities and costs calculated based on the actual costs of implementation. And as part of this legislation, you need to submit your annual rehabilitation plan, your final rehabilitation and decommissioning plan, as well as your environmental risk assessment report. And you need to cost for any latent and or residual environmental impacts. Then in terms of some best practice guidelines, we have our ICMM, then Anglo-American Mine Closure Toolbox. We also have land rehabilitation guidelines for surface coal mines, our guidelines for rehabilitation of mine land, and our IFC standards. Okay, then just going through the roadmap towards closure. So basically, what steps do you have to obtain closure in the end? Some of them might roll over and be applicable throughout the process. So I'll just run through them. You need to understand the country's legislative requirements in terms of closure. So every country has their own legislation that needs to be considered when starting the closure process. Also, again, you need to integrate closure into your life of mine planning. It usually starts, not usually, it starts when you do your EIA, but sometimes closure might be lagging a bit. I have had a few EIAs where, for example, end land use planning has not been considered in detail, and it would state that this will be returned to pre-mining capability, and we all know that's quite difficult to do after you've mined an area and there's DSFs and everything. Okay, then compiling background information on social and biophysical environment. Again, important to understand your environment where your mine is located in. Someone has told me that there was a mine, I think it was on the West Coast, I'm not 100% sure, but this mine did the rehabilitation. It looked very nice. It was almost like a type of nature reserve. There were leopards coming back. But in the end, the community came and said, no, but this is not part of what they wanted. They want grazing, they want to farm crops, and they had to change their rehabilitation and everything. So really important to understand your biophysical and your social environment. Then setting and refining the closure vision, principles and objectives. What are you moving towards? What is your closure vision? What are your objectives? What do you want to obtain in the end? Then engagement on your closure vision and post-closure land use. This falls back on what I said now. Very important to ensure that everyone is on the same page, and you won't do something and then later on the community might say, but we did not want this. Okay, then detailed end land use planning. Compile your closure actions and success criteria. So you have a plant. What are your closure actions for this plant? How are you going to break it down? How are you going to remove it? You have a waste rock dump. What are your actions to rehabilitate this area, as well as your success criteria to see if you are moving towards your closure vision? Then identify, assess risks and opportunities. So mine closure is a risk-based approach. You need to take into consideration any risks and plan for it to, in the end, reduce your liability. But it does not only have risks, there's also opportunities, which we will touch on now with the end land use slides. Then again, collaborative multi-stakeholder consultation on the success criteria and possible residual risks. Like I said previously, you need to you remain liable for residual risks. Residual risks, a good example is groundwater pollution. If you can plan for that, you can already put mitigation measures in place. Then costing of closure actions, also something that rolls over, which starts already during the EIA phase. We already have to cost for planned disturbances, and that needs to be updated annually. Then your development and updating of final rehabilitation and closure plan. Your monitoring, maintenance, and auditing also important. Is your rehabilitation successful? Do you need to go back and do some more rehabilitation? Then empowerment of communities and affected parties. In the end, you as a mining company want to leave behind a positive legacy. So it's important to leave something behind that empowers the community and that's useful and beneficial. And then in the end, we have relinquishment and closure, which is your end destination. And then in terms of the below section, you need to include or do progressive concurrent rehabilitation. That in turn also lowers your liability. If you can already rehabilitate dumps that you know you're not going to go back to, you can basically only include monitoring and maintenance for the set amount years, and afterwards you can exclude that area if it has been successfully rehabilitated. Then again, important, again, stakeholder engagement. You really need to engage with people and ensure that everyone is on the same page. I know this is a hard topic. I know I remember when I started in closure, you were not allowed to mention closure loudly because it was usually a negative. There was a negative connotation with mine closure, but I see it is definitely changing now in more recent years. And then again, planning and implementing social transitioning so that you can leave something positive behind. Okay, then with regards to end land use planning, so the basic principle is it needs to be safe, stable, and non-polluting. But what I want to do today, and I hope I'll change or plant the seed today in a lot of people's minds, that we can change this and think a bit outside of the box and ask ourselves, is it beneficial? Is it reusable? Is it sustainable? Do we empower the surrounding community? And does it contribute to economy? So just an example, I know a lot of times with a large open pit, the solution chosen is usually to put a berm around and a fence around, and that's it. But wouldn't it be nice if we can use that open pit for something else and not just exclude that whole entire piece of land and just put a berm around and a fence around? Okay, so now we get into the fun part of the presentation. So in terms of infrastructure, we all know how the population is growing. So on the right-hand side, there's just a graph that shows how our population is increasing. But why can we not reuse the infrastructure that we already have? So basically, it's adapting and reusing existing buildings and infrastructure. It reduces the environmental damage and the carbon footprint associated with demolition and reconstruction, and it also enables energy saving and maintaining social value. So I'll run through a few examples now. They might not all be mining related, it might be other examples, but it's just to show that we can really reuse old infrastructure. So, like I said, I usually do this interactively and ask people if they know where this is, but I'm sure everyone knows where this is. This is Kimberley. So this is the old trams that run through Kimberley town, and they were used during mining of the big hole. So you can go there and you can get onto one of these trams. And a funny story, the first time I went on one of these trams, a car drove in front of them and we had a bit of an accident. But anyway, another good beneficial post-closure use for all the infrastructure. There's also the museum, so also a lot of tourists go there to learn about the mining process there. Then another old mining town, I actually didn't know about this, but they used to have gold panning championships. So it's quite funny. I didn't know it can be a championship, but you actually have gold panning championships. So this is Pilgrim's Rest. A lot of old buildings still in use and pulling a lot of people due to the mining history. So I don't know if they still do the championships. I think they stopped now. I'm not sure if they're going to start again, but another interesting thing to mention. Then another example, this is Heidelberg. It's an old train station. So you can go here and you can go sit in an old train and eat your lunch or dinner. They also have a railway museum. So also, again, reuse of old infrastructure. It's not demolished. It has a post-closure beneficial use, post-closure use in terms of a train station. Okay, another example, I'm sure a lot of people know where this is. This is Kruger National Park, and it's a hotel. So this is an old train, railway, and you can go and stay here in a nice hotel and look out in the Kruger National Park. So again, reuse of old infrastructure. Then Cullinan mine, Cullinan town where the mine is. It's an old, a lot of old mining infrastructure is still there. I think there's the old mine manager's house where you can go into. It's like a museum. You can do a tour in town. And I know they also have a railway restaurant, which you can still go and sit down and eat. Okay. Then this one, I don't know if anyone has seen this before. I hope they did their risk assessment. But this is actually in Joburg, and it is old grain silos that they've converted into student housing. So they've stacked the containers, and it's apparently student housing. Then this is also another quite popular one, Gold Reef City. So I've been in mine closure quite a while, but I've mostly worked with above ground infrastructure. So sad but true, this is the only place I have gone underground. So if you want to give anyone that type of experience, you can do it at Gold Reef City. There's a shaft where you can go down in. We know all the roller coasters is there, and there's also a lot of information relating to mining, old mining and everything. This is an example in my hometown. This is a flour factory. They which closed, but they now use it for markets. And a lot of the old implements and stuff have been put up against the wall, so it's quite interesting to see. Yeah, and they have a market once a month here, and people can get married in this old factory. And they also have like shows with people that comes to sing and stuff like that. So also bringing in money, and it has a use. Okay, then some other examples. So this is in New Zealand. These are old grain silos that they've converted into vacation accommodation. So you can actually go here and stay in one of these grain silos. Another example on the left-hand side, that's a water tower in Denmark. It has been converted into an apartment block, so people actually stay there. And on the right-hand side, that's the House of Vans in the UK. It's a section of the underground that they have that they converted into a skate park, so people can go roller skating or skateboarding. And another use for a section that's not anymore in use for the railway. Then just an example of a house built with containers in Mexico. On the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, that's a water tower. So from my understanding, that's an active water tower. It's currently in use. And below is offices. So those are people, there's people working below that in that water tower. Okay. Then continuing to mine residue facilities, these include waste rock dumps, tailings storage facilities such as coarse tailings facilities, fine tailings facilities, discard dumps, and overburden dumps. And if you live in Joburg, you would have seen a lot of those tailings are being reprocessed. So let me start on the left-hand side. So that is a client of mine, and they used to mine in a shaft underground. But during COVID, when operations had to reduce their capacity and everything, they started mining their tailings, their old tailings. And they are actually making more now out of their old tailings that they have decided not to go underground again. So they are just remining their old tailings, and as such, also reducing their liability. It's a lot easier to rehab a flat surface than anything with a slope. So yeah, a good post-closure use. And like I said, in Joburg, also a lot of these old tailings are being reprocessed now, opening up land for industrial development, opening up land for housing, etc. So also very good to do this, and it's really like I said, that client is not going underground again because they are getting a lot more from these tailings now. Then we have Pan African Resources, solar farms, a great example. We have so much land that's of the mining. We can just use it for solar with our current electricity crisis. The random photo of the sheep, it's not random. Why not consider mixed land use? Why not do a solar farm, but then have sheep grazing in between? So just a bit food for thought. Okay, then Shane, that guy's fishing in a pothole. Another nice use of waste rock is for road building. So I have another client that has given one of their waste rock dumps to a third party, and that third party is removing that waste rock for road building purposes, and also again reducing that mine's liability because it's a lot easier to rehab a flat surface. So every time we do an update for them, we can exclude a bit more of that dump that has been removed. Another example, when you have a rehabilitated dump, you can open it up for bike riding, for picnic, etc. I have a client in the Western Cape that has a very nice rehabilitated dump, which are planning to open up now for the community to come and do like mountain biking. Then continuing to open pits. So open pit mines are used when deposits of commercially useful ore or rocks are found near the surface. So this is a quarry. I think it's somewhere in Europe. I just can't remember the name now, but it is an active quarry, and they close this once a year, stop all operations for the Red Bull off-road race. So you can go and look on YouTube. There's some interesting videos. It looks quite scary, but anyway, it's a operational quarry, but they close everything to do this Red Bull off-road race. Then another example, zip lining over an open pit. So I'll play the video now. I apologize. There's no sound. I think the sound's only playing on my side. But if there's anything, I'll try and talk everyone through it, but we might finish earlier because yeah, some of the videos won't have sound. So it's way more dramatic with the music, so I do apologize that we do not have sound. Okay, another example, the same company do these, what do you call it, go-karts. Okay, then less dramatic. This is a client of mine in the Western Cape. It's a lime and dolomite mine, and this is one of the older open pit areas. So they have an agreement in place. I think everyone is aware of day zero that they would have had if all the water dried up. So they have agreement in place. If that ever happens, the municipality can pump water. This is clean water out of this pit and use that. So all the infrastructure is there. There's actually a pump with the piping and everything. So another use for that clean water. Another example is wetlands, creating wetlands when you have a pit lake. So I know about another mine that's doing floating wetlands in their open pit where they want to do bird watching. So they've created these floating wetlands, birds nest in these wetlands, and they want to start doing bird watching. I wish our one director was here because he would have been able to tell you about carbon offsets, about constructed wetlands and everything. He's very good with that. So yeah, all I can say is constructed wetlands, it's very good. Another post-closure use to consider. Okay, then this is Krugersdorp Game Reserve. This is an old quarry, and they've created a bird aviary in this old quarry. Then another example, this is in America. It is also an old quarry, and people come here to vacation. You can swim there, they do boating and stuff like that. Then this is also a South African example. I think some people might know where this is. So this is Bass Lake, where they do a lot of scuba diving training. So also quite popular. And it's also an old quarry. Not a lot of people know this. Then a lot of, well, not a lot of sites, but there are now sites that want to implement this. So this is to create hydropower. So I've read there's one in Canada, one in Australia. If I'm not mistaken, I think I saw there's one in Finland, if I'm not mistaken. But it basically it includes an upper reservoir and a lower reservoir. So the one I read about is they want to use this in conjunction with solar and wind power. So when there's additional electricity, water is pumped to the upper reservoir. And when there's a lack in enough electricity, that water is allowed to move and create hydropower. Then we spoke a bit about Kimberley already, so the big hole, a nice tourist attraction. Then I spoke to someone that does alluvial mining at the coast, and they've actually started abalone farming in these voids where they removed the diamonds. So creating jobs, I know a lot of the community is on this project, and it's creating jobs, it's creating food, so also something to consider. Then again, aquaculture. If the water is clean, why not include aquaculture? Why not allow for fishing and assist with food production? Okay, then underground, I think a lot of people is thinking, oh, you cannot do a lot with underground mines. So let's see. Shaft mining is an excavation method used to access an underground ore body from the top down, and it is usually sealed after mining. Okay, so sorry, I apologize again. This is one of the longer videos where the people spoke on, but I'll try and chat through it. But yeah, we might finish early then because I will need to stop the video with no one talking except me. But this is Iron Mountain. It's in America, and they store a lot of data in this. I think it's an old lime cutout. So I do apologize for the sound. So it's a big underground mine. So they store a lot of digital data there. And a lot of originals, original images, original films. And everything is stored here as well as digitized in this old lime cutout. So the temperature is also perfect for storing of all these films and stuff. And the humidity is also excellent. So there's a lot of original images and films and everything that they keep in here. So all of these old historic images are kept here. So what I also do is there's an old lake inside this mountain, and they use that water to pump through these pipes to keep the area or the rooms the exact temperature that they needed. So it's very big, and they're also creating new rooms to store more of the information and data. Okay, and they also do digitizing. These are they have generators inside to keep the lights on. Okay, sorry guys, I'm just skipping through now that we don't have sound. And there they are constructing new vaults. Okay. I think we can continue. So they do the conversions as well of um, all the old movies and everything. They do the data conversion as well there. Okay. Okay, next one. So at least this one you can read the subscripts at the bottom. So basically, you can do underground farming. Let me continue to the video. And we all know how we are losing valuable land for agriculture. So this is also a nice thing to consider. Okay, so basically this was an old bomb shelter and they converted it into underground farming units. So also something to consider. Also another example, I have a client in East Africa and they are considering handing over the underground mining areas to the military for use. So there's definitely things that you can do. Another example that someone gave me during another conference that I attended was also hydropower, pumping water to the upper shafts when there's a lot of electricity. And when there's a shortage, you can let that water move downwards to the lower parts again, creating hydropower. Okay, then another example, I think they call this the caverns. It's also a type of adventure park thing where you can again zip line underneath. I think this is also an old lime quarry. So let me play this video. Again, a lot less dramatic without sound. So a lot of ideas. Okay. Okay, so now with the takeaway message, when I ask the same question again, what are your thoughts when you hear mind closure? What I want people to think is opportunity. So there's definitely opportunity. We don't always have to put a berm and a fence around something. There is potential. We just need to seize that potential. Okay, so if there's any further questions, you're welcome to contact Teresa or myself, and we'll get to those promptly. But thank you for attending our first web chat for Lasha. We do appreciate it. And I would like to remind everyone about the conference we will be having. Let me just put those slides on. Teresa, I don't know if you're online.
Yes, I am.
Okay, so you're welcome to contact Teresa. We do have our conference that's planned in September. And yeah, please go to our website for more information and please become a member. We will have some nice member benefits such as free web chats and discounted SACNAS accredited talks as well. So thank you.